One of the most mysterious and rarely spoken of fairies in the world is the Gancanagh, or the love talker of Irish and Scottish fairy lore. The Gancanagh is said to be one of a kind, a solitary figure who wanders the earth in search of human companionship. He appears as a beautiful man in his 20s or 30s. So beautiful, his appearance is said to sometimes move people to tears. He is always well dressed and presents as gentlemanly and charming, with a smile that can melt a heart and mesmerizing eyes that betray a hidden sorrow. William Butler Yeats said that this fairy, quote, personated love and idleness, and always appeared with a dédain in his jaw in lonesome valleys, and it was his custom to make love to shepherdesses and milkmaids, end quote. Yes, the Gancanagh is a notorious seducer of women, appearing in isolated places with a cocked hat and an Irish tobacco pipe, which in modern times he has likely exchanged for a smokeless cigarette. The Gancanagh stuns with his beauty, and then soothes with his gentle voice and lovely words. The air seems to shimmer and then still whenever he's near. Birds stop singing, and all the sounds of the world fade away, so that it is only him and his intended, together and alone where nothing else matters but each other. It is powerfully unfortunate to meet the Gancanagh. If, as a woman, you catch his eye, he may whisk you away in an intoxicating experience beyond your deepest dreams, and then vanish from your life, leaving you heartsick and pining for the rest of your days. For, like many of the fairies, the Gancanagh is fickle and easily bored. Though only a special woman can catch his eye, he loses interest quickly, and resumes his lonely search for another heart to break. If as a man you encounter this always yearning fairy, a little of what plagues him may begin to plague you. You may find yourself lovesick, desperate for the attention of some special person, and yet find yourself rejected again and again, or else left with a constant feeling of restless yearning that can never be satisfied. It is difficult to avoid the Gancanagh or slip through his fingers if he has you in his sights. He is a shapeshifter and able to move among us undetected whenever he pleases, hiding his otherworldly beauty and appearing as an ordinary man, though one small detail may in those cases give him away. The Gancanagh does not cast a shadow. No one knows why the Gancanagh does what he does, or if the day will come when he will stop breaking hearts and fall in love truly and forever, though there are many theories. Some say the Gancanagh was in love once, but that he lost this love in some terrible tragedy. Since then, he has been doomed to wander the earth in search of a love that rivals the one he lost. Others say the Gancanagh committed some terrible crime against the fairy people and has been banished from their company. Alone, forever cut off from his people, he wanders in search of companionship in a vain attempt to fill the deep hole that his banishment has left inside him. But even if these theories are true, don't feel too sorry for him. Don't get swept away. For the Gancanagh is a master of seduction. He will tug at your heartstrings and then tear them to shreds. Here are 3 possible encounters with this elusive and fascinating fairy. One day during the summer of 2010, I went to see a psychic in Boston. After that, I left to go to the mall in Braintree. I was in one of the Borders' smaller bookstores walking towards the anime section when I saw a new type issue that had me wanting to grab it. Before I could get through my fourth manga, something odd happened. It's like my senses were flaring, but I didn't know what was the issue. The stand I occupied was near the center front of the store, across from the cash registers. The other two aisles were further back, separated into two sides with shelves on each. Most people were walking about, looking and reading, though the longer I looked, the stranger it seemed. It was like people didn't even notice it, but they were naturally reacting to it. As natural as breathing, they were clearing the main aisle. The atmosphere seemed heavier, the lights dimmed some, and everything slowed. I was on alert and getting more paranoid by the minute. I wanted to leave, but stood still like a deer waiting for a predator. I looked towards the registers, but the cashiers seemed unaware and busy. It was like an opening was being made at the end of the store. So when the middle aisle was nearly cleared and people were in the side aisles like that was normal, I tensed. It was like tunnel vision. Then suddenly something was behind me. I was expecting it from the front, but it tricked me. Before I could see it, it was close behind me, leaning over me, whispering intimately in my ear. It sounded like wind, like a stream, like a language I had never heard before in 100 whispers. It pressed on me, and I shrunk back a bit. I froze in shock, and then it was gone. Reality returned to normal, and I found myself looking back at breakneck speed. But nothing was there. Gazing around, people were just oblivious. The atmosphere was fine and the lights bright again. But I was shaking. So I left. The only thing I could say about the figure is that it felt taller than me. I'm 5'4", 5'5", and it felt warm. I used to live in one of the suburbs north of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The area wasn't fully developed back then. There were sections with lots of houses interspersed with farmers' fields, wooded areas, and a series of ravines connected by walking and bike trails. I was in high school at the time of this incident, working at a coffee shop on a strip mall not far from one of these ravines. One of my best friends from those days, who was also my neighbor, let's call her Jane, worked at the shop with me. I've known Jane since elementary school, but it wasn't until grade 10 that I started to develop a crush on her. I'm a guy, by the way. Jane was just a really cool girl, pretty and fun, but I never told her how I felt because we'd been friends for so long and it would have been strange. And she always seemed to have a boyfriend. Jane was an outdoorsy person. She liked camping, hiking, exploring the ravines, and especially cycling. She had this bike that was her prized possession. She even named it Zeus because it had a lightning bolt on its side. Anyway, so one evening, Jane and I were working the closing shift together at the shop. All day she had been complaining about a headache that seemed to be turning into a migraine. Finally, she decided to go home early, and her dad came to pick her up. I told her not to worry, that I would close up the shop and then ride Zeus home for her and park it in her driveway. Closing didn't go smoothly after that. A big group of teenagers showed up at the last minute and ordered muffins and mochachinos. They took forever to finish and leave, and by the time I'd washed all their dishes, mopped the floors, and closed down the cache, it was getting close to midnight. Normally, I would have walked home along the main roads, but since I had Zeus, I decided to take the bike path through the ravine. It could get pretty dark down there at night, but there were lights along the bike path, so I wasn't too worried. You have to go down a big hill to get into the ravine, and I rode the bike down it, picking up a lot of speed. So I was riding through the ravine pretty fast. Suddenly, I run over something and hear this pop, and my back tire starts wobbling. Luckily, I was able to slow without crashing. I couldn't see whatever I had run over, but it felt like a branch or a piece of wood. I rolled the bike under one of the lights to examine the tire and found it stuck in several places with thorns. The tire was going flat. As I was trying to pick the thorns from the tire, I realized I was not alone. I heard this rustling sound in the bushes, and all my senses suddenly went on high alert. This was usually a safe area, but I had heard about the occasional coyote attacking a pet dog, and in that moment I had a strong sense that there was some kind of animal nearby, watching me. I was about to jump back on the bike when I noticed a man walking towards me down the bike path. My first thought was to feel relief. I figured that this man was out walking his dog or something, and that's what was in the bushes. But as the man got closer, I started to feel more and more uneasy. The man was extremely handsome, for one thing. That's the only word I can use to describe him. But not a normal kind of handsome, like the most handsome model you've ever seen in a magazine after they were airbrushed and made to look completely perfect. And he was even more perfect than that. He was taller than me. I'm around 5'10", and I would say he was at least 6'1" or 6'2", and had dark hair and black eyes. Immediately I thought, he's not human. I don't know why I thought that. I wasn't someone who believed in supernatural stuff, and at that time I wasn't even into ghost stories or anything like that, but I couldn't get the thought out of my head. The man was looking at me, and I was staring at him, frozen in place, not knowing what to do. Suddenly he said, "Hello, I'm looking for someone." Then he described the person he was looking for, and the description matched my friend Jane exactly. I was freaking out at this point and just lied and said I didn't know anyone like that. And he stared at me without blinking, and I had a strong sense that he knew I was lying. Then, more forcefully, he said, "I'm looking for someone. Where is she?" I said, "Sorry, man, I don't know. I can't help you." And I started walking the bike away from him quickly along the path. As I walked, I could hear his footsteps behind me, like he was following me. I walked faster, and the footsteps started pounding faster as well, matching my speed. At this point, I didn't care anymore and started to run, and I could hear the man's footsteps running after me. I made it to the top of a small hill, jumped on the bike, and rode as fast as I could down the other side, hoping I'd be able to make it out of the ravine on the flat tire. As I pedaled, I glanced back behind me and saw the man standing at the top of the hill under the light. He was just standing there, staring after me. as if he couldn't follow me anymore, like he was at the edge of his territory or something. The next day I spoke to Jane and told her what happened. She told me she'd never met that man and had no idea who he was, but that sometimes when she rode her bike through the ravine, she felt like she was being watched. We were both sufficiently freaked out that we vowed never to go through the ravine again. I never have, and as far as I know, Jane hasn't either. A few years later, she went away to university. We've kept in touch, and she's never mentioned any problems with stalkers or strange men bothering her or anything like that. Which makes me think whatever I met that night really wasn't human, and is confined somehow to the ravine. This happened in 2013. My then fiance and his parents rented a cottage for the week and invited me and my parents to come out for the long weekend. It was supposed to be a bonding weekend where my parents would get to know his parents better before the wedding. Everything was going well. Our parents were getting along great, but me and my fiance, not so much. We were arguing the whole time over small things and constantly getting on each other's nerves. It got to a point where I started to doubt if I even wanted to marry him anymore. I guess I was already having cold feet before the weekend. He was only my second boyfriend. I'm 28 now, but I was only 24 at the time. And I had started to think we were rushing into things and that maybe I would be missing out on other possibilities getting married so young. There came a point on the third day where me and my fiance had a big fight. I can't remember what it was about. I just remember being mad at him and I wanted some time alone to think. So I told everyone I was going on a walk up the beach to get some ice cream. There was this tackle shop about half a mile up from the cottage that also sold ice cream. I know, weird, but it was actually pretty good. It was early evening when I headed up the beach by myself and eventually decided to walk into the wooded area that ran behind the cottages so I could be alone. There were families on the beach and I felt like crying and I didn't want people staring at me. I followed a hiking trail so I wouldn't get lost and eventually stopped and sat down on a large rock that I found. I was crying at this point and feeling sorry for myself and thinking about how mad everyone would be if I called off the wedding. I was out there for a long time because it started to get dark and I could see the sun going down between the trees. I tried to calm down and just get back to normal before heading back to the cottage when I looked up and saw this man sort of appear out of nowhere. Everything was kind of blurry because I was rubbing my eyes and I don't remember his face well. I just remember he had dark hair and very clear blue eyes and that he was beautiful. I thought I was hallucinating. It had been very hot and I was probably dehydrated from crying, so I started to feel panicked. I got up and I was shaking and then I think I passed out. When I came to, I felt something warm wrapping around me. And soon I realized it was him, the man I had seen. I could feel his skin touching mine. It was very soft and his hands were gentle. He was whispering in my ear in a language I couldn't understand, but it was soothing and I felt perfectly calm. It was almost like I had known him for years and it was right for us to be together like this. I felt a butterfly feeling in my stomach at the same time whenever he touched me. The kind of feeling you get when you have a crush on someone. It was like I had had a secret crush on this being, whatever he was, my whole life. And he had finally paid attention to me for the first time. I tried to speak to him. I asked him who he was and what was happening, but he didn't reply. I remember I looked into his eyes and I was thinking that he looked sad. Like he wanted to say something to me but couldn't. I don't know what happened next. I think I blacked out. When I woke up, the being was gone and I was in the same spot, leaning against a rock. I felt fine, like I had just woken up from a relaxing nap and headed back to the cottage. I wasn't sure what had happened, but I couldn't stop thinking about the experience. Later that night, I looked in the mirror and noticed a mark on my neck that looked kind of like a hickey. I never told my fiancé about this, and eventually we worked things out and we did get married. I love my husband now and I don't regret marrying him for a second. But ever since that experience at the cottage, I've had this feeling of guilt that I can't shake. Like I committed some kind of betrayal. The weird thing is, I don't feel like I betrayed my husband with the being I met on the beach. I feel like I betrayed the being I met on the beach by marrying my husband. Thanks for watching. That was the first entry in a new series I'm starting called Fairies in Focus, in which I'll go into more depth about one fairy or one group of fairies than I do in the Scary Fairy Bestiary. I had the idea because I had a lot of subscribers asking me about this particular fairy, the Gancanagh, and I had collected these stories and I thought it could be fun to make a video just for him. Also, I knew it was going to take me some time to get to G in the bestiary, and people were really waiting to know more about him. I think this could be a really fun series though, so if there are any fairies you guys are really interested in and want to know more about, either from the bestiary or from the True Fairy Story series, let me know in the comments and I may do a Fairies in Focus video on that particular fae. In the meantime, please keep sending me your scary fairy encounters. Whether they're scary or not doesn't matter, just send them to me, and like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. And until next time, this has been a visit from your Scary Fairy Godmother.